In June 2005, whilst doing some routine maintenance close to Mt Unzen, Japanese workmen uncovered the remains of a melted television camera which was buried in the earth. Although a surprise discovery, the workmen immediately recognised the significance of the find, as this was almost certainly a camera from a television crew that had been killed during the eruption of Mt Unzen back in 1991. Although badly damaged, the videotape inside still held recoverable footage, and for the first time in 14 years, the final moments of the doomed film crew were seen. This story takes place in Japan, one of the most seismically and volcanically active countries on the planet. Japan sits at the junction of four major tectonic plates: the Eurasian, North American, Pacific, and the Philippine plate. These plates all meet under Japan, and the result is a stream of almost constant seismic and volcanic activity. Japan has over 100 active volcanoes, and that's about 10% of the world's total, and thousands of earth tremors are recorded every year. Tsunamis are also not uncommon. As a result, the Japanese population are accustomed to living with these events. Schools hold regular earthquake drills, evacuation routes and safe zones are basic knowledge for local residents, and emergency broadcast systems are widespread and tested often. However, despite advanced planning and tried and tested safety procedures, people still die. In this case, the 1991 eruption of Mt Unzen, the danger was well known. The volcano had already been erupting for weeks, and most of the local population had already been evacuated. And yet, on June 3, 1991, despite all the warnings and the precautions taken, when Mother Nature showed her full force, people died anyway. Mt Unzen is an active stratovolcanic complex located on Japan's Shimabara Peninsula. Today it's made up of four peaks: Fugen-dake, Myoken-dake, Kunimi-dake, and Heisei Shinzen. Back in 1990 though, it had just three peaks. The Heisei Shinzen peak didn't then exist, but it was around this time that the Unzen complex had become active and this new peak was beginning to form. What made this interesting for volcanologists was the formation of what's known as a lava dome. Now, if you're anything like me, your idea of an active volcano is huge clouds of ash and smoke billowing up and red-hot runny lava running in rivers down the side of the cone. But not all active volcanoes are like that. From what I understand, the formation of a lava dome occurs when the silica content of the magma is high. This then forms a thick, sticky lava which pushes up, slowly but surely. As this magma reaches the surface, it cools, and instead of running down the slope, it forms a rock crust. Over time, this ever-growing crust can form a massive rock dome on the top of the mountain. It's black on the outside, but red-hot with magma on the inside. And by May 1991, the Unzen rock dome was becoming very unstable. As the magma kept on pushing up from below, parts of the outer dome were breaking off and barreling down the mountainsides. This rock that was collapsing, thousands of tons of it at a time, was newly formed igneous rock, and as it fell it broke apart, pulling in air and releasing superheated gases and steam. This created an extremely dangerous phenomenon called a pyroclastic flow. It looks like an angry cloud, but flows downhill like a tidal wave, hugging the ground and following the contours of the land. These flows can move very quickly, reaching speeds of anything from 150 to 500 km an hour or more. They're also extremely hot. Temperatures inside these flows can reach as high as 700 degrees centigrade, and they're filled with millions of flying particles of red-hot rock, toxic gases, superheated steam, and choking ash. For anyone caught in the path of one of these moving at full speed, the effects would be lethal: an intense, powerful blast wave, followed by being seared alive, shredded by rock shrapnel, and then suffocated. About the only consolation from this is that you'd almost certainly die quickly, and hopefully you wouldn't feel a thing. Anyway, back to Mt Unzen. By May of 1991, the lava dome had become very unstable, and on the 24th of May, the first significant dome collapse occurred, sending a flow some 2.5 kilometers down the Mizunaishi Valley. At this point, local authorities decided that caution was the appropriate response, and evacuations began from the surrounding villages. Further and larger flows occurred on May the 26th, and thereafter these became an almost daily occurrence. At this point, the evacuation zones were expanded, roads were closed, and remaining residents were strongly encouraged to leave. However, as the danger grew, so did the spectacle, and as everyone else was leaving, some people were arriving, and they were aiming to get as close as possible to Mt Unzen. You see, the first pyroclastic flow, the 24th of May one, had been caught on camera and had become a TV phenomenon in Japan, the footage being played over and over again on the network. Of course, all the other TV stations then sent their reporters and television crews into the zone. Everyone was scrambling to get the best viewpoint and footage of the now daily dome collapses. As well as the TV crews, there were also supporting personnel, people like taxi drivers and food delivery drivers. Police and firemen kept a nominal presence, and around the end of May some well-known faces had appeared, most notably the celebrity volcano couple Maurice and Katia Krafft. Alright, celebrity might be overselling it a bit, but in the world of volcanology, the Kraffts were about as close to being celebrity as you could get. This French husband and wife couple had spent decades travelling the globe, getting up close to hundreds of eruptions and capturing incredible footage which had been used in many documentaries. They were well known, not maybe famous to the guy in the street, but in scientific and media circles they were pretty much famous, and they were here, along with the American Harry Glicken, who was another well-known volcanologist. So these groups, the media, firemen, scientists and police, had all more or less converged on the same location, which was a small hilltop 4 kilometres from the Mt Unzen summit. The TV crews referred to this as the fixed point. From here, they had an unobstructed view of the mountain down the Mizunashii Valley. This area became a kind of a permanent camp for those remaining inside the evacuation zone. So even though the area was officially evacuated, there were still lots of people around. Taxi drivers came and went, police patrolled and fire trucks roamed the area, and some stubborn villagers just refused to leave. Now everybody who was there thought they were well out of harm's way. If a flow came anywhere close, they could just move the camp back a bit. And besides, they were already 4 kilometres from the mountain on an elevated hilltop, so what could possibly go wrong? Well, on June the 3rd, everything did. At just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon, an enormous section of the dome collapsed, and this sent a huge flow down the valley. Due to the low cloud and rain, nobody at ground level saw this, not that it would have mattered much if they had seen it. There'd already been smaller collapses early in the day, but this one did something different. Due to the amount of material involved, it produced what's known as a pyroclastic surge, a cloud of lighter material that pushed out and ahead of the main flow, travelling faster and further than any of the previous flows had gone. It was moving at an estimated 360 kilometers an hour, and it had a temperature of around 500 degrees. This cloud completely swamped the fixed point and the surrounding area. Man, there was no point running, and there was nowhere to hide. In fact, most of those killed would have had little idea of what was actually happening. The Kraffts and Harry Glicken might have guessed what was going on, but that knowledge made absolutely no difference. The surge hit the fixed point in just 40 seconds, and it incinerated everything in its path. 43 people were killed. TV crews, policemen, firemen, villagers, and famous scientists, they all died as the pyroclastic surge just rolled over them. The whole area around the Mizunashii Valley was devastated. Cars and houses were burning, pets and farm animals had been killed, trees had been snapped like twigs, and ash just covered everything. It was a scene of utter destruction. In Japan, the deaths were front-page news and very quickly prompted a reassessment of safety protocols around the mountain. Within days, a much wider evacuation zone was implemented, and this time nobody was allowed inside without formal approval. No photographers, no TV crews, no famous scientists. A very sensible precaution, as the day following the implementation of this new zone, another huge dome collapse occurred which sent flows even further down the valley, and this incinerated hundreds of homes, but this time around nobody was killed or injured. As for those that had already died, the remains of those victims were eventually recovered, but this operation had to be conducted carefully because the volcano remained active for weeks afterwards. One thing that wasn't recovered was the television camera. It had been buried deep in the ash and it remained hidden for the next 14 years until the workmen dug it up in 2005. The recovered tape makes for haunting viewing, not because it shows anything dramatic, but because you know you're watching the final moments of these men's lives, and it's all very routine and everyday. One man complains that the lens is getting wet, another asks if they've got the shot lined up correctly, a car drives past, possibly a taxi, somebody calls out to another crew member, you see a man opening a car door to get something out. There's no urgency, no screaming, no awareness that these moments are in fact the final ones. Just at the end of the tape, one man asks, "What's that noise?" The camera pans towards the mountain, and then the tape ends. Today, 35 years after the disaster, a trip to Mt Unzen feels surprisingly normal. The roads are open, the towns have been rebuilt, and the Shimabara Peninsula is once again a popular tourist destination known for its hot springs, scenic viewpoints, and volcanic landscapes. Visitors travel through the area unaware that one of Japan's deadliest volcanic disasters unfolded right there. The volcano itself is currently dormant, although it's still active, and the lava dome that grew back in 1991 is today known as Heisei Shinzan. It's a jagged peak of igneous rock that didn't even exist before 1990, but is now the highest point in the Unzen complex. Across the peninsula, several sites have been preserved as a reminder of the devastation wrought by the volcano back in the 90s. Buried houses, damaged buildings, and even a primary school have all been preserved, frozen in time, half buried in the compacted ash. The Uzendaki Disaster Memorial Hall documents the events of the Unzen eruption and explains the geology of the Unzen complex. It has interactive exhibits and also displays many artifacts recovered from the disaster, including the famous melted television camera.